It's Saturday, January 30th. This is the ESE Mini March contract. Tonight we're looking at a weekly, and I want to talk about what constitutes a measured move, what is a balancing area where the market goes into balance, and how precisely, since their overnight is included, that the ES contracts trade. The SPX is useful in some situations, which we'll talk about tonight, but there isn't the precision since the overnight is not included. First of all, let's look at some measured moves. This was a measured move. This is balancing. This is a measured move. And then we have the big bounce, and then we have a measured move here, and a measured move down, and then we basically have the big measured move into this high. Doesn't make the highs, and then we have basically balancing going on, and then this is a measured move, and we have a measured move going on right now. So let's just look at these measured moves. This one, pretty much predicts that we're going to have a measured move. We don't know what kind of. This is the August dump this year, or of last year, and then the recovery. So then we have this measured move, followed by this measured move. Well, you can see the possibilities were kind of both ways. This was either going to retest and regen lower, or it was going to pick up this measured move, which basically picked up into the first and second targets. Didn't go, when you look at the weekly, much beyond. And then we basically have this measured move, which you can see picked up right here. And this went way beyond the first and second target, so we're entitled to that extension, which we've already broken. Let's switch over to the SPX. Well, before we do, let's just talk about this. This is the all the way halfway back of this move. There's really no particular reason for this to retest and regen lower here, other than the fact that we've got a big bar here. So we've gotten into it. We're not going to get further into it. The real retest and regen, when you just look at this, is naturally here. But there's really nothing that predicts that, because we're deep into this. There's no expectation on my part that if we got that deep, that we would necessarily retest and regen. And that's where I change over to the SPX contract. And the reason this won't reflect it is because of contango and backwardation. Backwardation is where the price is essentially lower than the cash contract. So we're seeing that this move here is at almost 1940. So let's switch over to the SPX. And the backwardation is essentially that this high is quite a bit lower um, and than the high that you would see on the SPX. The SPX doesn't trade with exactly the precision, but let me bring this down. I'm going to switch into the daily here. And this is some of the precision problems. If I go all the way halfway back on this, I'm not going to really capture that RTRG. So I had to pick somewhere where essentially that I could pick up the RTRG. And what I did is I picked this point so that I could find the RTRG. You're going to see that we're about 7 points different backward in backwardization on the ES contract. And this thing kind of gets squashed up by repeated backwardation. This is much more on the ES, much more backwardized because we were 20 points different up here, but we're seeing down in this particular part of the contract, we're about 7 points backward. So this RTRG on the ES would be about 7 points less. So essentially 84-ish would be where we, is that an 8? 84, 85, probably closer to 85. Let's just take a look at this real quick. Yeah, that's an 85. So it would be 1985 as opposed to 1984-ish. So we see this coming up into a halfway back. I guess on this contract, you see a little bit at the daily level, at least. We're seeing a little bit more reason for this. At the weekly level, we really weren't seeing a retest regen. So we're using this unbackwardized high to predict this RTRG, as it were, lower. This sort of pre-predicted this down move in the sense that it tested here, and we're going to test back into it. Let's just look at the ES one more time. We'll switch into the daily, and in this case we can see pretty much the same behavior at the same point. So we're saying 84, so that would test back into just barely into this bar. 85, I should say. That's what we came to. So that would be the RTRG, and that makes some sense. I'm not going to try and make sense of a move down here. I'm sure there's one. So now we're going to switch over to a 4-hour chart. In the 4 hour, this is the measured move we're looking at, and we're obviously coming back into the halfway back test. A little bit more detail, but you can see that we had previously tested back into this area. We've got some measured moves down here, and we're now in our recovery. We went to a halfway back, and since then we've built a series of moves. I want to just look at that. There's one thing I want to point out here. Okay, so we built a couple of traditional, a big traditional. We came all the way halfway back, and we've been building off of that since with a traditional here, a traditional here, another traditional here. We can see these are kind of getting squashed up, and so essentially that'll keep squashing up in traditionals. The same will happen eventually in extensions too. They'll start squashing up, but we needed to get that extension push up into the target above, about 4 points above. And I just want to point out how obvious it is on these extensions that you're going into extension. You see no let up at all on Friday in price. It just kept going up. Now, we'll look at the 15-minute, but what I just want to point out is we're overdue for a retracement here. This is pretty extended in the 4 hour. So let's go last to the 15-minute. Okay, this is basically, I'm only looking at the recovery, and the only thing really important here is this big traditional, just like I said. And this kind of got overdone, so we had to scale back to something that had caught before. Actually, a couple times we had a lot of difficulty over these days, and we started building at this point. So we have a traditional here, and the important one that got us going in the overnight was this big traditional. And then since then, we see a series of extensions. And in the 15-minute, you can see these were starting to flatten out some until we got a pretty good push into the close. We have 3 distributions. We have a distribution down here, a distribution here. We pushed up into a new distribution. So come Sunday night, we'll start seeing whether we're going to push immediately into the target. You can see we haven't traded here, or whether we're going to trade back in here for the push in. Makes some sense to do that, but we don't really know. This extension may just keep moving up into the target, and we get a retrace. Potentially after that, we don't know whether it'll retrace as far as, but once we get a failure here, then pull this back where extension started. I think we've got this one never traded that I can see, so I don't know why I have that one in here. So I haven't got it figured out here, but there must be some extensions in here that traded that I don't have, or maybe another traditional. I'll have to figure that out. But essentially, if this is truly where extension started, then once we break wherever that is, we should have this retrace. Okay, I've filled in the 15-minute time frame with the proper traditionals and extension. Let me pull this up a bit. We had talked about the traditional here that had traded here and here. I had taken the extension from here, but that's not correct. There was a traditional that traded here, and then price went into extension. So once there's an extension that breaks, we'll pick up price from right here, wherever that is.